About 25 years ago, my dad, we played Piece of Heart on a Sunday morning, and he said in the afternoon, I want that played at my funeral, and I want you to play that cornet solo at the end. And I said, I couldn't do it now, let alone whenever you pass away. So thank you for playing that solo today. This last week, our family has just received so many wonderful comments. Phone calls, text messages, cards, and it has just been a delight to hear different stories about our dad. And we are overwhelmed by your presence here today. Thank you so much for coming and helping us celebrate our dad. How do you describe Max Wood? Well, son, brother, his mom called him Maxie. Husband, student, teacher, dad, grandpa, great-grandpa, silly grandpa, nephew, uncle, father-in-law, a coffee lover. He was many things to many people: an encourager, a confidant, advisor, prayer partner, musician, composer, arranger, soloist, speaker, counselor, disciplinarian, a gentleman, a gentle spirit, a friend, a mentor, a sensitive man, a prayer warrior, a man of God. Often in this last year, after losing Mom, Dad really felt like he didn't have any purpose in his life anymore. He kept saying that he needed a job or something to do. And we would encourage him and remind him that he could always pray. And this would bring a smile to his face, and he would nod or sometimes reply yes. And we all knew that he prayed for all of us because he was truly a prayer warrior. The family always knew that we were being covered by his prayers. And oftentimes we were reminded that when we didn't know what to do or didn't have the words to say, to pray. Dad was a studied man. Yes, he knew music and theory and composition, conducting, and he used these talents for the Lord. But he was also a learned man of God. He studied the Bible regularly. He knew it, he shared it, he tried to live it every day. And one of Lynette's fondest memories was seeing Dad early in the morning, reading his Bible and praying before the day began. This impacted her to see that he was taking his time, this time, so that he could walk the talk. This carried over into his daily life. We would have devotions as a family, sometimes in the morning or around the dinner table. Our home was always open to take in college students, a little girl from Scotland, a family from Africa, and those who were struggling. He loved those who were lost or who were struggling spiritually. He was a man of integrity, always trying to do what was right. He loved his family. We had so much fun being together. He had an illness in his 40s that changed his life, and our family took up camping. And we traveled across the United States and saw things that a lot of people never got to see. Mom and Dad continued to camp after we had all left the nest, and they enjoyed it for many, many years into their retirement. All 5 children knew he was a strict disciplinarian. When Dad said no, he meant no. Of course, we didn't appreciate this discipline as we were growing up, but we are all a living testament to the results of that discipline. Our children and our grandchildren find it hard to believe that Dad was ever really like that, because they only remember him as a tender, loving man. He loved to give kisses and hugs and tell us that he loved us. He was always so proud of his children. And in the last year, he took time to tell each one of us how proud he was of us. Dad was an outstanding musician. He was a premier cornet soloist in his younger years. He taught music to thousands of elementary students in his 30 years of teaching. He was a bandmaster at the age of 18. and continued that for many, many years. He spent summers teaching summer band, was on the staff at Echo Grove Camp and Central Music Institute for years. Dad had perfect pitch. And just recently, when Kris was visiting Dad, they couldn't remember the tune to one of the pieces that the marching band would play from one of his schools. And so I started to sing it, and I can hear him in the background saying, "Wrong pitch." So I immediately turned it to the right key, and then he just said, "Good job," or something like that. Cheryl would often say, "Dad, what note is that elevator bell?" And he would have it. Well, last weekend when we were doing vigil, when Dad was trying desperately to go to heaven, we said, "Dad, can you sing a C?" And in his weak little voice, he sang a C, and it was spot on.
Well, we always talk about music with Dad, but it really wasn't the be-all and end-all for him. It really wasn't. He didn't listen to a lot of music at home. He listened to our music, but he didn't have a lot of his own collection until he got older. But it was a tool for him. It was a tool used to lead people to God. Whether you were a student at school or someone in the core band, the music was a tool to expose you to God. And he believed, and he told me this many times, that all music was a gift of God, even the horrible music that I listened to, that he said was a gift from God. And he would sit and listen to my music, and it was rebellious music sometimes, but he would listen to it. And I'd say, "So did you see God in that?" And he would sometimes say, "I have a hard time finding God in that, but I'm sure somewhere he's trying to get out." Jim Odgers and I were talking yesterday, and he told me that Dad looked at every person as a soul that needed Jesus. Not as a horn player, a cornet player, or even a drummer. Even drummers needed Jesus. It's amazing. I needed to learn that. A soul is always a person in need of a Savior. And Jim, I figured out yesterday, played the longest under my dad's leadership. For over 54 years, 59 years, I believe, Jim played in a band, starting in 3rd grade at Roosevelt Elementary School in Pleasant Ridge, all the way up until Clearwater, Florida. Jim played under his leadership. And that's just an amazing thing, because he probably knows more than all of us, but I don't think he's telling too many stories. But these nicknames we've heard about. I asked Dad, "Why do you have nicknames?" And he said, "Because I was young, I didn't know how to remember the students' names. I taught at 3 elementary schools, and I didn't know how to remember their names, and somebody said, 'Give them a nickname, you'll remember.'" And for all of our lives, we've run into people, and Dad would call them by their nickname and then say what instrument they played. And then I'd say, "Who was that?" He said, "I have no idea." But he remembered their instrument and their nickname. So that was his thing. And we've heard about the funny names and the silliness. But for us, his family, he was our biggest fan. I thought you were going to cry. But he always believed in the best for all of us. He didn't demand excellence at all, but he sure encouraged it. He would say, always, try to say something negative in a positive way. Like if a flute player in school was missing a part, he could tell her, "Oh, that's horrible," but he never did that. Or he could encourage her and take her step by step, note by note, just through each thing, and positively encourage her. And I have seen him do that over and over and over. In a moment when I would be saying something not nice, he would look for the positive, and he would build us up with praise. It was a gift that he had. Well, one time we talked about Interlochen. I was at Interlochen with him, I was in college, and every morning we would go at 8 o'clock to hear the World Youth Symphony practice. And a world-famous conductor that Jim would know, Bill would know, was there. And I'm not going to say his name. But he was just brutal in leading the World Youth Symphony. And in this one section, this oboe player had a solo, and she made a mistake, and it cracked a little bit like oboes do. And that conductor stopped and just ripped her up and down, just horribly. And Dad sat up on the edge of the chair. I thought he was going to run up on the stage and punch him. I really did. And I said, Dad, don't. And he looked at me and says, what? I said, don't do anything. And when the break came, he did something. He didn't punch the guy. He went up to this guy who didn't know him from Adam, world famous conductor, and said, I hold you personally responsible for the well-being of that young lady. And then he turned around and walked back. Well, what happened, the end of the story was that after the break, they went back, they played, and then they got to that part. The conductor was conducting, he didn't look. She came in, her solo, played it flawlessly, and he stopped. And I thought, oh no. And he said, young lady, you did yourself and us proud today. And everybody cheered. And then that conductor turned and bowed to our dad. I love that moment. I have a lot of great moments, but that was one of the moments. He didn't care who you were. If you were wrong, you were wrong. And he wasn't afraid to tell you. He loved our kids. We're here to speak for the children. He loved our kids. They got spoiled like we never did. He would do things for them that were against the rules for us. That was okay. They were so important to him. He shared words of encouragement with every one of them. He would speak privately and tell them things they needed to hear in love and encouraging ways. He had simple rules for life. God was first, family, others, and then self. We all came before he did, all of us. We're more important to Dad than he was to himself. But God was always first, always, no doubt about it. He was tough, but I want to tell you, we found ways to get under his skin. Jackie mastered the art of getting under Dad's skin. Sherry didn't do very often anything to get under Dad's skin because she was just so nice.
Perfect.
She was perfect. She really was. She still is? Oh, wow. But then I figured out that I had one way I could get under his skin. And so I would get the Arbans book out, and I would practice, and I would intentionally miss a B flat over and over and over. And I would play it faster and faster and faster, and I knew he was listening somewhere in the house. And finally, he would come to the top of the stairs and yell, B flat! And after that pause, I would say, I know. And he would laugh and laugh. We did that a lot. Laughing, joking, and getting each other. And the gotchas were always so important. No matter what the issues were, we were told to laugh. When we disagreed, we always ended up laughing. We have disagreed. We've all disagreed during the illnesses of our mom and our dad. We haven't always gotten along with each other. It's been hard for us. It has been something that I don't wish on anybody, to see your parents go through this. And sometimes I just didn't want to go. I didn't want to see the decline of Dad. But every time I went, I walked away blessed and happy that I had gone. Because he was surrounded with love, and he gave love. Even if it was on the phone, and he would say, hi, he always said, I love you.
It was really hard for Dad the last 13 months after Mom passed away. He missed her so much, and he didn't really know how to live without her. And he was receiving wonderful care where he was living by the staff of Right at Home, and he loved them, and they loved him like he was their father or their grandpa. But as his dementia started to decline, and he just was too much for them to handle, and so we began to look for another place for Dad to go. And we prayed desperately that we would find just the right place for Dad. And through God's guidance, we were able to find Noble Home Care. It's a private residential home for elderly people. And there we met Diana, the owner, Gabriella, her mom, they're going to stand up right here, and Auntie Veta right here. These are 3 godly women. Mm-hmm. They have loved and cared for our dad like he was part of their family. Yeah. They are wonderful Christian women, and they prayed with my dad. They sang to him. They even sang the morning that he went to heaven. They prayed with him every night when they put him to bed. And they lovingly cared for all of the residents, especially our dad. And they always have treated them with love and respect, and they respected their dignity. Diana was a music teacher in Romania, and she's a vocalist. And so we have asked her if she would come and sing It Is Well With My Soul, and she's going to be accompanied by Kris.